Hi, Catherine. Thank you so much for joining the CIO Association of Canada for My Career in Tech, the series that features women in technology who are empowering, supporting, and sharing ideas to support diversity and inclusion in the workforce. Thank you so much for joining us. I thought we might first start by just asking you to introduce yourself, tell me a little bit about yourself, your current role, and of course, your amazing volunteer role with the CIO Association of Canada.
Great. Thanks so much, Lee. Thanks for the invitation to participate in this series. So I'm Catherine Chick. I'm the SVP IT at Canada Goose, where I have responsibility for global technology. Canada Goose is a luxury apparel company, and we have a long-standing Canadian roots, and we still manufacture all our parkas and jackets in Canada. Our technology team supports all areas of the business, including manufacturing, supply chain, corporate services, as well as our wholesale, retail, and e-commerce business. I'm also on the board of the CIO Association of Canada for both the national board as well as the Vancouver chapter. I'm leading the programs portfolio, which supports the delivery of our member events, including the recent fireside chat with John Chen, the CEO of BlackBerry.
Yeah, that was really fantastic. And we're looking forward to our next one, which will be with the president of Cisco, Shannon Leninger, to celebrate International Women's Day. Thank you so much for that. We appreciate you giving us some background on who you are. So this year, International Women's Day is focusing on the theme of, and this is the theme and the pictures they want us to circulate, breaking the bias, to create a diverse, equitable, and inclusive world. We know that in Canada, based on a lot of research I've read, gender diversity in the tech sector is very, very low. So how have you had to deal with gender diversity and bias in the sector? And then do you have some examples of how we can improve inclusivity in our sector?
So I started my career in the 90s. And at that time, it was very rare to have female leaders in any function, let alone technology. Mm-hmm. The world has changed a bit since then, but I would definitely say the pace is lagging. Public sector has done a little bit better than private industry, but the majority is really still male and majority white. So for those of us who have broken one or both of those barriers, I feel that we do have a responsibility to raise awareness in order to affect more change and a quicker rate of change. When people have had to overcome challenges, I think they become more resilient, better problem solvers, better communicators. And these are all qualities that we look for in our high-performing teams. So, things that we can do include our recruiting practices. The first step to making any real change is to bring the right people into the organization. And I think that, if everyone could really look at their selection criteria to ensure that they do have a level playing field. If you're in a technology role and you're looking for people always that have that perfect pedigree of ComSci degree and X years already doing that function, then you're certainly limiting the types of candidates that you can get. And you are possibly creating additional barriers for different groups. For women in particular, I think there's always been a disadvantage when they've been juggling things like maternity leave. And as any hiring managers out there, they really do need to look at the person's performance and not be penalizing them for what they think may or may not happen during a leave, whether the person's coming back. They need to be treating that person with the same thought that they would treat somebody else. And if they are high performing, still have them as candidates for those higher level positions and in line of succession and all of those other things. So, I think that there's some certain biases that people are unconsciously putting into the workplace. And I think it will take a conscious effort to remove those and actually pave the way.
That is great. I really appreciate your insights. And I totally agree with you on the HR and the hiring and making sure we just try and break those biases there and how we support our own teams in their own personal growth, whether they've been away for personal reasons or back or maternity. It's so important to understand how they want to grow as individuals in their roles. So that's really amazing. Thank you so much for that. So we're kind of doing this now, but I wanted to ask you about your career and some of the people who have helped you along the way. Or mentors. I call them woman tours, but that's what I call them. And we're kind of doing that right now, having that opportunity to chat and learn from each other. Has that been a big part of your own career journey?
Well, when I was starting, I don't think there were programs, formal programs for mentorship, but I do think that I've found it along the way. Perhaps it wasn't quite called that, but it's something that you can find for yourself. So I reported to almost exclusively male bosses for the first or the majority of my career. And I definitely have found a few amazing individuals along the way, where they've taken the time to offer advice and support and really shaped my career development. I've also found mentors in my own peer group. I don't think that mentors necessarily need to be somebody that you report to. For me, it's, if there's somebody in your peer group that you admire for leadership qualities or other skills that they have, it's being open to listening and really asking for their advice. And I think if you're open and receptive to feedback, then that's really the cornerstone and the basis of mentorship. At this later stage of my career, I've now been asked to mentor some people, both formally and informally. There are definitely programs, like Canada Goose has a program for mentorship, in which they do ask for volunteers from the senior leadership to provide mentorship to employees. And those are things that, obviously I can participate in, others can participate in. But I also think mentorship is something that doesn't stop. Like, I am always still looking for that next mentor, and continue to keep in touch with my mentors from my past. And then it's that circle of giving back and also being able to provide mentorship as needed or as asked, and being open and available to helping others. I do think that as a mentor, you get back probably more than what you put in. I learn so much from people who I supposedly am mentoring. And I think hearing that perspective and feedback from the generations that are following you really ground you in what you're doing ahead, because we have our own perceptions of what it's like to be 20 or 30 or even 40 years old. And hearing from people who are those ages now, they have a much different reality from when I was those ages. And I think that's an interesting perspective as well. And you do learn something as the mentor from your mentee.
It's true. And I think the pandemic has shifted so much of our communication that, we even learn more from that from our mentees, and as we mentee and mentor. And, there's a lot that's happening in the world that has shifted how we communicate with each other. So I so believe in it. And it's been such a big part of my career, having individuals who've helped me along the way in my career, and just having someone to talk to, and also being a mentor as well. And yes, you're right, hearing that feedback and just learning is so amazing. So thank you so much for that. So we kind of talked a little bit about this, but just in your daily work life, what are some of the 3 actions, you take to break the bias? And really encourage a voice for women, especially in our tech sector where you've built your career?
I think, for this topic, I really think that the key is awareness in order to even know that this is something to focus on. In the perfect world, I would say that we wouldn't need to have campaigns for diversity, equity, and inclusion, because that's just how people should be. But I think that's an unrealistic view. I think that there's a lot of social norms that have already been built in, and it's unrealistic to think that people can just break those biases on their own. So I do think it is actually conscious awareness, which is the main point of what everybody really needs to do. And, for me, in terms of actions, things that I've done, we talked a little bit about the recruiting earlier, but even our programming at the CIO Association, looking for diversity within that programming. That's not always easy. The first names that come up are usually easier, and it's maybe doing that extra effort and search, and then finding an amazing voice who happens to be diverse and lending that voice to the conversation. I think that, you can also do things like encourage groups that perhaps need extra support. So back to that mentorship conversation. So participating in, I've volunteered for things like the junior achievement and case competitions and other sorts of programming for youth where you can provide some of that feedback and support and encouragement to those early generations to be able to try to encourage them to kind of stay the path on either a technology career or whatever career that they're interested in. And I think that for somebody, when we get to these positions of leadership, that our real responsibility is really to show up and to walk the talk and to be a role model. And so by doing those actions myself, it's really in the hope of encouraging other people to also do that.
That's really wonderful. Thank you so much. And that's one reason why we're doing this series, just to highlight some of the amazing people we have within our membership and that support our organization and outside of our membership as well, you being one of them. So thank you so much. So the last question, this gets asked a lot, but I always find the answers are really interesting. So what are 3 tips you can provide to women in the workforce right now, just on their career support? It could be reflection on home life balance, any of those things. What are 3 tips that you might provide?
Yeah, I think I would have the same advice, male or female, but perhaps some of these things speak a little bit more to women because maybe sometimes women need to be reminded a little bit more on these things. But one is, really to set your own bar rather than waiting for other people to set it for you. It's having that confidence to be able to set a high bar for yourself and not feel bad about doing that. I think another is to find the right people and ask for help. And there's no shame in asking for help. In fact, it's probably the smarter thing to do, to acknowledge the fact that you're not going to get there on your own and create that community and network around you that's going to support you and help you to get there. Mm-hmm. And then I do think this one is a little bit more for women than for men, but it's to stop feeling guilty for putting yourself first. And I think as daughters, as mothers, as sisters, I think that there's always a little bit of that, and that's sort of ingrained into how you were brought up or your culture. As a Asian female, definitely it wasn't particularly highlighted to put yourself first, and you always did feel a little bit bad about asking for anything beyond what someone gave you. And that doesn't do you well in the workplace. There are some bosses that will look out for you and do the right thing for you, regardless of whether you ask, but you can't expect that. And that's not a normal standard for workplace behavior. So you really do have to ask for yourself, advocate for yourself, and you shouldn't feel bad about doing that. And that's something that I still work on right now. I would say that last piece is one that you really have to overcome a lot in your own mind to be able to get to that place where you can feel comfortable to do that.
That is really fantastic advice and a great reminder for me, and I'm sure those that are watching this. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you for bringing your insights and your expertise around your own work career and your career path, and we really appreciate you participating in this. And our next in the series will be Yasmin Cesar, who's from our Toronto chapter board, and she's going to be talking about some of her work she's done in STEM and STEAM, and we look forward to welcoming her. So thank you so much again, Catherine.
Thanks so much, Lee. It was a pleasure.